Don't matter what your name is, share your story. We'll be waiting, God, yeah, for the haters, whoa.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to For The Hayters podcast. Today, if you aren't watching on YouTube, we are missing Laura. So if you're new here, it's just myself, Becky, but we're joined today by James. James, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm James. I'm from Chicago. I made the trek here, and I'm happy to be here.
And I'm happy you came. I guess this is already starting off good.
Set me up for that. I didn't say anything.
So it's interesting. This is, I think, the first time that I've done the podcast by myself.
Okay.
You're in for a treat because Laura normally swoops in if I'm going out on tangents. So
let's go on tangents. Let's have fun.
So awesome. So you had reached out to us, and there's a couple layers to your story.
Yes.
Well, I would say more than a couple. For those of you that are listening that aren't, watching, you don't see James as person and who he is, which is kind of interesting because, your looks have played such a huge part in your life, right? So the people listening don't know what you look like.
Sure.
If you kind of want to just jump, I always say it, jump right in, and start from when you're a kid.
Sure. I feel like I've told variations of this story so many times, it's hard to pick where I want to start. But yeah, I guess, so when I was a kid, I was always kind of just overweight. I learned what the word husky meant very early in my life, thanks to my uncles always, calling me husky, and I learned like, oh, I'm fat. But a lot of my childhood memories, I feel like are kind of blurry now. At this point, I'm 31, so like remembering back to when I was 5 or 6 or even 10, they've kind of fallen by the wayside. But I remember one memory in particular sticks with me to this day. It was in elementary school. I don't remember what year exactly, but we were running the dreaded mile run in gym class. Mm-hmm. And
I think everyone knows that all very well.
And I remember I was obviously the last one in the class to finish, but I assume it was my teacher's idea. She had everyone wait by like the finish line and like cheer me on and like root for me. And it was obviously a good-willed gesture, but I remember even then when I was so young that like I think it was the first time I realized that I was like different from everyone else, and it was like I was embarrassed that like they weren't rooting me on because I was like the best. It was because I was like to them it was like sad, and so and I remember like crying hysterically, and that was my first like introduction to like shame and embarrassment. And thinking back on it, I think that's the first time I realized like that's maybe where my issues with my weight and my self-esteem came from. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was overweight through high school, up until college, and it wasn't until the end of high school when I really started making a change for various reasons. But
it's interesting that you talk about the way that you had just said that about you being different. I don't know if I've ever, heard someone say that from weight, right? Like you hear people say that because they look different because of their ethnicity or the way if they have red hair or something like that, and having that feeling of almost like not fitting in because of that. I guess, I mean, we actually have had someone on before that talks about, his weight affecting him when growing up, and how teachers didn't really help him and how kids bullied him. You guys kind of grew up in different eras. But it's interesting that is what the first instinct of your feelings were, because that's a dominant thing that's going to stick with you for a really, really long time.
Oh, sure. I mean, they are two distinct like chapters of my life, and I feel like they are two entirely different lifetimes, if that makes sense. Like I almost feel like it was a different person because I'm so far removed from that, and I'm also treated very differently now than I was growing up. However, the way that I was treated when I was overweight has affected me to this day.
Yeah.
So it's a weird kind of dichotomy or space to live in, I guess.
Before moving forward and talking about, high school or after high school, were there other things that you could talk about that happened that were defining points in your life?
I've tried to my therapist has tried to pull these out of me. And I had a pretty good childhood. I did. My parents were upper middle class. I was good grades in school, good friends. Played music, and there was nothing really traumatic or any sort of traumatic event in my childhood that kind of spawned this thing. I always remember just really kind of liking food, and not really having any sort of control as far as that goes. And I think that in tandem with my parents both worked, and so preparing meals wasn't always, it was also a very different time as far as what we know nutrition wise versus how things are now. But meals were what was quick and what was easy after both parents coming home from a long day of work.
Yeah.
So that definitely contributed.
Was it something that overeating that ran in the family?
No,
No?
actually. So my mom was like a super fitness freak, honestly, like always working out, always going to the gym. And my dad has been pretty standard his whole life. So I was the outlier in the family.
Yeah. Did you play any sports growing up, or what were the activities that you had done?
I played soccer pretty much from elementary school through high school, up until college, and then in college I tore some cartilage in my knee, and that effectively ended my soccer playing days. But I was pretty active. I think I just ate more than I could balance out with physical activity.
Yeah. Did you notice, the impact that your weight and that aspect of your life was having on your social life, or, the pain that you held within you?
Not initially. It wasn't until I was in high school when I really noticed that how I looked affected my social life. Up until that point, like I said, I had a good group of friends. I was fine. I think the big change for me was, like any other boy in high school, was I started trying to flirt with girls and whatever, and obviously was rejected left and right. And I was like, oh wait, what's the difference here? Oh, I'm overweight. And no one would say it, but that was the case. And but up until then, I was pretty ignorant to it. I didn't really realize my own weight until middle school, high school, and the bullying and all of that started.
Do you want to kind of dig a little deeper into that?
Sure. Kind of like the mile run incident, I wasn't super overtly bullied. There were just a few incidents, one in particular that I remember vividly, and it was just these kids that I was actually very friendly with. One day we were at lunch, and I went to sit at the table, and one of the kids out of nowhere said sorry, there are no room for whales here. And I was just so taken aback, because it was just wait a second, what? I thought we were cool, man.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're saying that, and I don't remember what happened from then on. I just remember crying, and just being really upset. But it obviously stuck with me 20 some odd years later. So, that was really the big one. And then gym locker room, like nightmare, you know.
We had someone previously come on that, talked about being bullied as well. And this was a question that, was brought up. Have any of those people that caused those issues to recognized it later, like now? Has anyone apologized, or has anyone ever reached out to you for maybe something that they had said?
No. I've ran into these people recently, within the last few years, and they've been very kind actually, and have said like, "Wow, you look great. Like, you've changed so much. I don't even recognize you," but no sort of apology of any kind.
Do you think that you still like hold some type of like anger or
Not really.
No?
I really don't. And I had written about one person in particular. The person in that one bullying incident, and I posted it on social media, and a lot of people were like, "Wow, screw that guy," blah blah blah. And I ended up deleting his name because for me it wasn't even about that. Like that. For me, like we're good. Like that doesn't affect me anymore. I am so above that, and like I recognize like seventh graders are just idiots, and like I am not offended, and that doesn't keep me up at night. I've moved beyond that.
And how long, what age was it that like you came to the realization, grasp of, basically you taking control?
Well, that's a good question actually. I think I'm still taking control. Really, I think that it's something that will be a continuous struggle to control, and it's just something that I have to be mindful about. But I think it wasn't until maybe 17, 18, when I really started to kind of develop some sort of game plan and try and actually rein things in, and was very mindful of my diet.
So that's what was the big change, was first year diet?
Yes. I had a band teacher actually who was very influential for me. He was very big into like bodybuilding and stuff on his own time, and I don't even remember how it came up, but somehow he ended up making me a workout plan and introduced me to like the basic concepts of like protein and like calorie needs and stuff like that. And I kind of started from that and just like went really hardcore actually first into like a bodybuilder diet, like a lot of protein and like plain tuna, like gross stuff. And then obviously that's changed now, but yeah, it was weird looking back on it. Like the stuff that I put my through because I wanted so desperately to change, I guess. Like eating cans of tuna plain, like that's pretty gross.
What was your heaviest weight? What age were you?
It was around that time. I want to say 16, 17. And it was like 310.
That's crazy.
310. And I'm, for those who can't see me, I'm like 5'7", so
Yeah.
not exactly the tallest. So 310 on a 5'7" guy is pretty big.
Yeah. Wow. And it was just all from just poor eating?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And my family, well, yeah, I guess my family is pretty good at putting on weight, I think. I don't know if that's going to piss off anyone in my family that's listening to this, but I think that we didn't exactly win the metabolism lottery. But yeah, I remember like my after school snack before dinner would be like 2 lean pockets. So they were lean pockets, so they were good for you.
Yeah.
No, but and that was like before dinner.
Yeah.
Like, so that's like, I don't know, doing the math now. I don't even know. I haven't had one in years, but like 600 calories as an after school snack for a 17-year-old. Like, it's not the greatest.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just like.
And was there anything else just besides not having a good eating habit that do you think could have triggered the overeating? Because I know a lot of, actually, I shouldn't say I know, but I do, well, yeah, I know people that overeat from, other personal reasons, that it stems from something else.
Oh, definitely. I've done a lot of thinking about this, obviously, and I really am convinced that it is. I like to indulge in the finer things in life, the things that are good and taste good. Like I want to indulge in them, and it just gets me into trouble.
Yeah.
Not with just food either. Like it's just things. I don't know. It's the pleasure drive, I guess.
Do you think that there's some sort of like addiction to food
No.
or to pleasure?
I think it's just one of those things where like this tastes good, so I'm gonna eat it, and then like I don't want it to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I would say addiction. I don't know.
I have questions that are going in my head, but I don't want to jump the step of the transformation.
Sure.
Right. So if you kind of want to talk about that process a little bit and, what it was like, and because it wasn't just a body transformation, you're changing mentally a lot as well.
It was very gradual, honestly. I kind of lost weight throughout undergrad, and it was a lot of like hard work. But again, like even when I did lose a decent amount of weight, I still felt insecure, like the 16-year-old fat kid, and that still stuck with me. And I don't know. Even to this day, and now I'm kind of jumping around. I still feel that way sometimes. So it's very hard for me to describe it, because it's yes, I've made a transformation, but there are things that are still to this day that stick with me, and I have to be mindful of or struggle with. I know it doesn't really answer your question.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So it was just like a gradual process. You started losing weight, and then, it must be easier for you now than it was.
Much easier. I have it down to like a literal science now.
Yeah. And you started running. That's something that's important to you, right?
So I actually only started running like a year and a half ago.
Okay.
I hated running, like up until 2 years ago.
Don't we all?
Right. Well, now it's like my favorite thing on the planet. But so I have had 2 knee surgeries, one in each knee, one from that soccer injury that I mentioned, and then another one, I don't know how I did it. I just one day my knee was like really hurting and I needed surgery. So I had a repair on one, and then they just like cleaned out the other one. They were like, oh, well, you're not an athlete anyway, so let's just like cut this out and you'll be fine. And ended up re-tearing those things in both knees years later. But because of that, I was always like, well, I really don't want to run, so like I cycle a lot, do like elliptical and stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't until like a year and a half ago I started running. I think, oddly enough, it was because I was too lazy to get myself to the gym that day, but I still wanted to get a workout in, so I just went for a run. And it just kind of started going from there. And I wanted to like beat my time and see how fast I could go. And I got hooked. I got addicted to just like beating myself and seeing how far I could push myself.
Yeah.
Which I think has been a theme in my life. Just like trying to show myself and other people, I guess, like what I can do.
Do you think that's become, like a theme in your life now, from transitioning from the fat kid to, who you are now? Is you're trying to prove to other people?
Yeah, I would say 100% I have a chip on my shoulder still,
Yeah.
even though like it's odd because I think that people that I meet now would have no idea of that, because they're like, oh, like you look normal or whatever. But to me, I still see myself as the same person. So,
I mean, I think it's interesting that you say that, because I think that, over the past 10 years or however long it's been, you've been going through this physical change, that there's so much more mental change that needs to happen moving forward.
yeah. Yeah, totally. Gosh, I don't even know where to begin. I can go like 6 different ways with this.
We
yeah.
have time, so.
Yeah, it's something that I'm still going through, and I have to remind myself of the progress I've made sometimes, because I'm still very hypercritical of myself and my body and whatnot, and it like frustrates people that are close to me, because like, what are you talking about? You look fine, and I'm like, okay, maybe to you, but to me, like, I don't, and it's strange because I'm self-aware enough to know that, like, what my number on the scale is, but it doesn't matter. Like, what I see, I can still point out like 10 different flaws on my body. Like, well, you look fat here. Oh, you'll never have abs. Blah blah blah. Like, whatever toxic thought you can think of, like, it'll surface somehow.
Yeah. It's interesting that you just said, about how other people don't understand, they can say you look great or give you a compliment, and you're like self-deprecating.
Yeah.
That's actually an issue that I had to deal with, was not taking it personally of giving someone a compliment and them not receiving it. And it's something that I actively have to work on. My therapist once told me that.
Aren't they great?
Yeah, we advocate for therapy quite a bit on this show.
Sure.
I have an issue that I've been dealing with about everything not being about myself. And so that was a huge part of it, is that a lot of the time when someone gets upset, if they give you a compliment, it's about them in the
Totally.
end. It's not about you. And so I've worked on thinking and, being like, okay, this isn't about me. Obviously, your response doesn't have to do with me as a person. And I think that's important for people to recognize, to just be a little bit more, what's the word? Why can't I think of it? Not gentle. Patient, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah, a little more patient with some. I mean, regardless of the magnitude of the traumatic event that you went through, it's still going to affect you, right? And they might have not gone through it, or they don't see it as impactful as, something worse that happened to someone else, but there's still trauma there.
Yeah, I would say it's the single most. I've had more traumatic things happen to me in my life, but I would say that overall, being overweight is the most impactful thing that's kind of directed my life and my path, for better and worse.
And I'm sure, and I don't know if this is rude or inappropriate to say, and I'm sure it doesn't make it easier that you're like a good looking guy now too, that they're like, oh, like, why would you feel that way about yourself because you're a good looking guy?
Well, thank you. No,
I don't compliment guys often, so you should definitely take that as a compliment.
Thank you. Well, it's weird for me, like, to get compliments sometimes, because I spent so much of like high school and even college just assuming that no female would ever be interested in me whatsoever because of my appearance. And so much so that, like, in my 20s, I, like, maybe course corrected and looked for too much validation to kind of make up for the validation I didn't get in my teens. But
that makes sense, right? Like, I mean, I think that I also talk to a lot more people, but I think that makes complete sense, that there's, for you in my head, I'm thinking like your love language is words of affirmation. Like you need that even if you're not accepting it, you need those words of affirmation to, for approval.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds bad to say, but there have been times where like even people that I may not have been interested in romantically, like I will flirt with for them to reciprocate, and it just makes me feel good. Like, oh, they might be attracted to me.
Yeah.
That like, whoa, that feels good. I didn't get that, and strange is the only way I can describe it, because I would say at this point in my life I'm fairly confident with myself and my accomplishments, but that that need for validation, it's almost instinctual now at this point, from years and years and years of having the opposite.
Is that something you work on consciously?
Yeah. Mindfulness and all of that stuff helps a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a work in progress, and I know when it's happening now. I'm able to kind of be like, wait a second, you're doing this thing that you do sometimes,
Yeah.
so pump the brakes, buddy. and also like all of the times in my 20s that I have maybe seeked out attention, like, and have gotten it, never made me feel better in the end anyway, and just has landed me in more trouble. So now in my old age, I know better. I know better now.
Are there any other? I know that you said you could go down one of 6 paths.
Gosh.
What else do you think? It might be easier for you to answer a question.
I think so.
What else do you think that you go through now that someone else would go through that's in your shoes? What are other thoughts that you have? What are other feelings that you think you have that someone else that didn't go through what you went through? Does that help at all?
I think I know what it feels like to not feel comfortable in your own skin, or like those days you wake up and like it could be anything. Maybe you had too much salt the night before or whatever, but like, oh man, these jeans like don't feel good today, and then it like affects like, oh man, like this shirt is kind of tight. Oh, can you see like my gut? Like how do I look in this? And it just kind of spirals from there, and you spend the whole day feeling uncomfortable because you think that everyone thinks you look like a fat piece of garbage, and really no one's noticing that at all. But it's something you've created in your own head.
It's so consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just kind of spirals, and the next thing, like, you won't even leave. I've had days where I'm like, well, I'll go to the grocery store tomorrow because I don't really want to be outside today because I feel so bad.
Are there things that you found that help when you're in those thoughts? When you're dealing with those issues?
I usually work out. And I'm sure that's maybe not the best like behavior. I'm sure that could be problematic to some people. I have my own ways of like dealing, music, running now. But eventually I'm able to just kind of get back to normal and recalibrate and talk myself off that ledge and be like, okay, like you made it through the day and no one like laughed at you or said like, looking like you're putting on some weight, dude, or like whatever. Like, I don't know. I think just having those reality checks and kind of bringing things back into focus is important for me.
You brought up going to therapy. Do you feel that the things that you talk about, or the events that happen in your life, all have some type of connection back to this? Either the way you handle things or either the way you react to things? Like, is there always a connection back to this issue in your life?
I think some do for sure. Like, for example, like the validation that I mentioned earlier. I mean, that is 100% a direct correlation to that. A lot of times, I think when people seek validation, people think it's coming from like a lack of a parent figure. But I think 100% it's from weight. And ironically enough, people have assumed that about me because when I was 17, I lost my mother. So I think it's kind of a double whammy that people think that I have mommy issues too. And I don't think that is the case. And I can say that pretty confidently, thanks to, I think, 3 years of therapy now.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. I did not know that.
So it was, the timeline is a little blurry in my head, but I remember it was the summer before my freshman year of college. My parents went on a vacation and came back, and my mom was real sick, and they didn't know what it was. They thought it was like food poisoning or some sort of like parasite or something, and she just wasn't getting better. And eventually, after tests and everything, they discovered it was stage 4 colon cancer. And even at that age, I was pretty like with it, and the internet was a thing at that time. So I Googled like stage 4 colon cancer, and it was like the odds are not good for survival at that point.
Yeah.
And so that was like the summer before my freshman year. And then I went to school. I went away to school, and a week into my freshman year, one of my friends actually died in a car accident. And so that was like my first month of undergrad. And then a year later, my mom passed away. So it was pretty quick overall, from diagnosis to death. And I mean, I'm certain that has also impacted me in ways, but I think I'm still unpacking it, to be honest with you. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, each one of those things is a lot to deal with for anyone individually.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Right.
I mean, when it rains, it pours.
Right.
For most people that I know that have been through some type of traumatic event, have been through a couple really, really hard times.
Sure.
Do you think that your mom's illness triggered you to start losing weight, or do you think that choice was made prior?
That decision was made prior, because I remember, I had started kind of losing weight before then, and actually my mom, I have a memory of my mom thanking that band teacher that got me into working out and stuff, and just saying, how important he was to me and how much of an impact, and thanking him for, I guess, making an impact on my life. So at that point, I was already kind of starting that process.
And I don't want to be inconsiderate of the feelings and the story behind your mother, because I mean, there's probably a lot to unfold, and probably a lot that
could probably be a second episode if we wanted to, but that's fine.
And I don't want you to think I'm dismissing it, no. But man, that's crazy. Yeah, that's it's kudos to you for starting this journey of completely changing your life, of something that you dealt with for a majority of a conscious part of your life during some of the roughest times of your life. Because for someone, it could have been the easiest cop-out of giving it up. Someone going through not only your mother's illness, but the death of a friend of yours. That's any reason for someone to be like, okay, I'm going to, eat my feelings. For someone like you, that's what you grew up on, to not go back to that is very impressive. And you should be very proud of yourself for, sticking through.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I know you don't like compliments, but
no, I'll take my process in therapy is learning to accept that I'm okay sometimes. So This works out. Oh shit! I lost my train of thought.
of your mindset after these losses, of not losing that passion to keep making yourself better, because that's like a prime time for someone to just sink, right? And you hadn't even developed, you did, but in hindsight, like, you hadn't even developed the strength in that process to keep going through that, and you did, and that's crazy.
I think the ability that I gained to like kind of take a beating has paid off now. Yeah, I mean, those are the most formative years of your life, pretty much, and it was just kind of madness, and I mean, it got a little dicey, but I mean, I think I just didn't. To me, there was no other option. It was just like, I'm either gonna have a shitty life, or I'm gonna make the best of it.
We talk about that a lot. A lot of the people that come on that have come out on the other side of something traumatic, that's, you're left, it's simple. You're left with two choices. When something happens to you, you're either going to crumble or you're going to move forward, and, life's going to move forward with or without you. And, we have to, it's life, right? We have to choose to, in some way, even if it's a tiny baby step forward, we have to find that path to go down.
I struggle with this because I 100% agree, and I think that we are in complete control of everything we do, and we have a choice in everything. And so right now, it's hard for me sometimes to have, this sounds bad, but have empathy with that, because I'm like, well, okay, you are unsatisfied with this, well, just change this. And I need to remember that it's not that easy for everyone, and everyone has their own unique things they struggle with, and just because I figured out what works for me doesn't mean it's easy for someone else. So
yeah, and that's what I want to emphasize, the baby step, right? As long as, and it like, my baby step could be different from yours, but as long as it's a tiny foot forward rather than back, take as much time as you need to
Yeah.
The process is different for everyone.
Yes, and for me, I it's not possible for me to do baby steps.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be where I am now if I was like, if I took baby steps. I need to just be all in.
It's exactly that. I can relate to that so much. I'm like a all or nothing person, like, to the T.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm involved in something, or if I have a new hobby, or anything, and it's not always a good thing.
Right.
But if, from that, now, I mean, from this conversation, you obviously have a lot more soul searching to do, and more, accepting of who you are, but, you're working on that every day. If you want to kind of talk about what you are doing now, and, after college, and what happened.
Sure. So after college, I got my bachelor's in education. I wanted to be an English teacher, or so I thought. And then I graduated and realized that I didn't really want to do that. I just kind of liked reading books. So then it's a really disheartening feeling to get a degree and spend all this time and money and realize that all that, everything you worked for, you didn't really like. I mean, and I know many people who aren't using their degrees and are.
Yep.
But for me, it was very hard for me to kind of deal with that. I felt like a disappointment in my family for sure. And I think I love Long Island, but it's a very small place. Mm-hmm. And I think I just needed to get away from...
Did you go to college on the island?
No, so I went to Manhattan College, which is in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. Not Manhattan like you would think. But so I did get like the chance to get away from home for a little bit. But I graduated and moved back, and it was the same thing every weekend with the same people who I love dearly, but it wasn't what I needed. And so I had family out in Chicago who I visited, and stayed with them for a while, and they took me out, showed me the town, we had a good time, and they were like, well, what are you doing now? And I was like, well, nothing. And they were like, why don't you think about coming out here? And gosh, I want to say I was 23 at the time. And so from that trip to moving there, I think it was a span of 3 or 4 weeks. Um, I found an apartment on Craigslist. I actually Skyped with the people that lived there. It was a couple, and I moved in with them into this tiny, like, 8 by 10 room. But it got me there. And I got a job working at a summer camp, and packed my stuff in my car and drove out there. And 10 years later-ish, I'm still there. And so I was there and worked a bunch of odd jobs. I was a dog walker for a while, which was fun. And then my roommate got me a job bartending, which led to me getting another bartending job where I still am. So it's weird how that chain of events happened.
I feel like a lot of people that work in Chicago work in the industry.
It is an industry
Driven place.
driven
Yeah.
city,
Yeah.
for better and for worse. But yeah, I think about this every now and then. Like, if I hadn't messaged that one random stranger on Craigslist and lived in that apartment, would I even be where I am right now? Like, weird butterfly effect thought. But so I've been at the same place bartending for 7 years now. And kind of just did, like, the 20s, like, partying type of deal for a while.
Enjoying your life.
Yeah. I wish that I had done more sooner, but I've come to terms that I wasn't there yet. And then I figured out through a lot of time, a lot of soul searching, therapy, and whatnot, kind of figured out what I wanted, what I needed, and got back into, I started looking into programs that I wanted to get into, and at first I thought I wanted to be an occupational therapist.
We talk about OTs all the time on this.
Do you?
Yeah.
The theme that I've noticed is that I've always wanted to go into a career that made a difference and helped people, like teacher, occupational therapist. But after spending some time shadowing OTs, it wasn't really what I wanted. But I started taking all the science prereqs that I didn't take in undergrad, in preparation of some sort of medical profession. And then I realized, like, duh, it's right in front of you, like, nutrition. Like, what are you, like, duh.
Yeah.
And so I put the work in and applied to a master's program at University of Illinois Chicago, and got accepted, and I am about to start my second semester there, and come fall of 2021 I'll be a registered dietitian, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's great. That's amazing. Like, taking something that you went through and, like, turning it into a way to help either prevent or have some type of impact on someone else's life, from
Totally.
that. That's incredible.
I mean, and it's really exciting for me. Like, I just want to fast forward to then when I can help people, because, like, I've been there, and I just want to be like, listen, I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
Like,
and you being that person, you're going to make and I don't want to discredit people that are nutritionists that never had weight issues, but a lot of people like to hear from people that have been through something that they have been through. And so I believe that you're going to make a big impact on someone's life because of what you went through. And not that it makes it worth it, but it gives you almost a purpose of it.
I think so. I hope so. Yeah, I don't know. I am constantly telling people, whether it's, like, people who talk to me about, like, running after I ran the Chicago Marathon. A lot of people have come to me asking for, like, advice and tips, and looking for guidance from me. And, I get weight loss questions and stuff too. And, people say, like, oh, it's so hard. How do you do this? How do you do that? And the thing I always say is, like, I'm nothing special. Like, if I can do it, like, anyone can. Like, I'm not some, like, super crazy person. like it's just a matter of finding out what works for you and having the support to do it, or the willpower to do it. I didn't do it like, I'm not performing miracles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It really was hard work and a lot of energy.
That's what I think. Hard work and knowledge is really what it comes down to. You could do, all the wrong, be a hard worker, but do all the wrong things.
Sure.
So I think that I mean, I definitely agree with that.
And the internet doesn't help either. There's a lot of misinformation there too, which I hope to fix when I'm a dietitian and have some credibility.
Have your own platform to help others with
Yeah.
that.
I mean, did you know that you can, anyone can call themselves a nutritionist?
I did not.
Yeah, so you could call yourself a nutritionist now, and you can get a certification online if you wanted to, but it's a dietitian that's the real deal, the professional.
Huh.
A dietitian is the one that will work in like hospitals and things like that.
You learn something new every day.
We're always talking about advocating for ourselves in the field in school, so that's
And
my
not
little
having
shout
a-
out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other fun facts that that you
Oh,
want
gosh.
to?
I don't know. I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
But
We are doing this new thing where we allow our viewers to ask questions. So I am going to grab a phone from Leah, and then I'm going to ask you some questions.
cool.
So the first question is, how did you find the motivation on the hard days?
Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I didn't get the workout in, and I think the real victory for me was the next day not giving up and trying again. I've failed at this more than I've succeeded. That's really the truth of it.
I think that was the perfect answer. That was, I mean, yeah, I think that answer was perfect. It's important to know that you can, and I have a hard time dealing with that if, failing one day and picking up the next. I think that if I fail one day, then that's it.
Sure.
But, changing the mindset of failing one day and just working twice as hard the next, that could make a difference. So, thanks.
Yeah. Of course.
That definitely just helped me.
Good.
The next question is,
Let's hear it.
well, I think we know the answer.
Okay.
How long did it take you emotionally to feel like you're worth it?
I think it took about a year into therapy once a week to I always kind of knew that I had things that I've accomplished to be proud of, but I wouldn't let myself be proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it took about maybe a year where my therapist was like, dude, like, you're allowed to like enjoy the shit you've done. I think those are his exact words. It's a constant effort to remind myself of that, but it's important, I think.
And therapy is important.
Yes.
If you don't go to therapy, you should.
I tell all my friends, even if you feel like you are like in the perfect happiness bubble, like go anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's the best.
Yeah, I agree.
I look forward to it.
All right, last question
Okay.
is, how do you get out of bad habits as an adult? I want to break the cycle, but I don't know how.
I think it's important to hold yourself accountable. I actually learned this from someone who was pretty influential on me. His name is David Goggins. He's an ultra marathoner. And he had what was called an accountability mirror, and he would write the things that he was going to do or he wanted to do and put them on his mirror, and every day would look at them. And I tried that for a while, and there were so many times where I would just like see them and ignore them and then feel worse. I think the ability to look at them and be like, okay, like you need to start taking accountability for your actions is what is the most important thing. And even on the hard days, like now, a lot of times I don't want to go for a run. I'll look at my shoes by the door and be like, ugh, really? But I know that it's better for me, and afterwards I will feel so much better, so I do it, even if I don't want to. And yeah, I guess just kind of developing that work ethic. It's not easy. I'm not going to lie and say I don't have my own fair share of bad habits that I still struggle with, but you pick one at a time and you kind of attack them and chip away at them. Eventually the bad habits turn into good habits, and don't try and take on everything all at once. It will get overwhelming otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
No one's perfect.
Small accomplishments at a time.
It's a snowball effect. It really is.
Yeah.
You do something, you start feeling good about it, and that will seep into everything else.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. So the last thing that we like to do, we like to ask our guests to share their last word of advice. It could be to someone maybe that is struggling with something similar that you went through, someone that's struggling with it now. And think about it. What are your best words that you could give to someone through the struggles that you've been through?
Well, I think it goes back to what we started mentioning at the beginning of this podcast, was that anything that someone else might say is just a reflection of themselves. So really, your biggest adversary is yourself. That's going to be the biggest thing that will hold you back, and it will also be your greatest ally going forward. So, yeah, it's not easy, but stay hard, I guess. Life is tough, and you just need to kind of kick its ass.
I think that's a good final word. Just kick its ass.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that Laura couldn't be here today, but she was very, what's the word that I'm looking for? I don't know why I keep losing my words. She was excited to have you on, and she was excited to have this kind of story come on because it's a very big thing that affects a lot of people in our country. Obviously, we have a very big overweight problem, and seeing someone get through it and come out half decent.
Half decent. I'll take it. I'll take that compliment.
I'm just kidding. But you've beat it, and you still have a lot to go, but you should be proud of yourself, of where you are and how far you've come and the things that you've been through. So I'm very happy as well that, thank you for taking the time to come out here and sharing your story, because I truly believe that it's going to help someone. And, there might be someone listening that is going to have a question about something, and they can reach out to you, and we'll put your contact information if you're willing.
Yes, please do. I would love anyone with any questions or even if you just want to bitch about how you're feeling, please reach out to me, because I guarantee I can relate to you
in some way.
If not feeling the exact same way.
Yeah. I love that. And I love how everyone that comes on is just always so welcoming to everyone, even if they don't know them or even know what they're going through. And that's what we need in this world.
Well, I think the reason why that is for me anyway is that I know that when I was really going through my struggles, it helped me so much to have someone just listen or reach out. And so knowing that I could be that person for someone else, like I know firsthand what a difference that makes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I am more than happy to talk to anyone about that.
Love that. Again, thank you for taking the time, coming from all the way from Chicago.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
For those of you that are listening, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share this channel with your friends, because any new person that listens is another person that we can help. If you have a story you want to share, we're always here to listen. Whenever you're listening, if you're listening tonight, during the day, we hope you guys have a good night or good day, whenever it is, and thanks for joining.
For the haters, come on, do it now or later. Whoa, yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story, we'll be waiting. Go.